conoscere, apprendere, formare. Tutto questo è il Learning More Festival e noi di Radio FSC-Unimore lo racconteremo in diretta su Twitch. E quindi mettiamoci al lavoro.
Buon pomeriggio a tutti e bentornati al Learning More Festival. Io sono Valentina Moia e siamo qua oggi con Natal Dank. È una co-owner, adesso scusate, parleremo in inglese, quindi cambiamo proprio lingua. So today we are here with Natal Dank. As I was about to say, she is the co-owner and director of PXO Culture. Okay, perfect. I am remembering that correctly. And she's here not only to share with us her knowledge and wisdom of everything that she has founded, but also you've published a book recently in 2024. Am I
and
mistaken?
that's the second book. So exactly. I specialize in something called business agility in the world of human resources and workplace learning. So that's what I'm here today to do a 3-hour workshop on. So
amazing. And we are really fortunate because actually I think this can apply in so many fields. Personally, I actually study psychology, so this is very interesting. But my first question would be, honestly, besides being the co-owner and director and author, to these not only most recent book, but also your 2020 book, Agile HR, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, which is the one that's been translated into Italian
which is very important.
Which is very important for today, I think. Yeah.
So what drove you exactly to follow this path of learning and coaching and consulting?
Yeah, well, it actually started a long time ago. When I graduated from university the first time, I found myself in the world of banking and finance. And I discovered quite quickly that I was much better with people than numbers. And actually, that was probably better for the business as well. So I started to, I moved into roles where I was coaching and training people doing, I suppose, finance-related roles at the beginning. And then quite quickly you realize that that's all about things like psychology, behavioral science. How do you get people to collaborate effectively? How do you get them to work effectively? How do you build organizations? And so I actually did that for a number of years, and quite sort of in business related roles. And then I was hired to work in a HR team or a human resources team. And that's when I discovered that actually there's a whole kind of people side to a business strategy that is really important. It actually is often the difference to a business success. And that's what sort of found me here today. And then a number of years ago, probably about 10 years ago, I had done, I did that for a long time, and I realized that the world of work was changing. And I went looking for new ways of how do you build great workplaces. And I discovered the power of a method called Agile. And that was happening across business and particularly technology. And I realized there was a lot of power when you took that into HR, workplace learning, organizational change and development. And so that sent me on my way in the last sort of 10 years. And that's led to the 2 books and what I do now. Yeah.
Besides being inspirational, because it is starting from like the seed that you've planted and it's just created this ramification, that's wonderful. I am particularly interested in why Agile.
Well, so Agile is a term that gets bandied around quite a lot. And for anyone that's studying technology, probably have come across it as a way of working to sort of design technical products. But more and more, it's becoming a sort of a mindset of how you deal with complexity. And we now live and, work in an extremely complex, ever-changing, quite disrupted and sometimes chaotic world. And it's more and more, it's realized that we need new ways to solve these problems. And actually, a complex problem is very different to what we had before. There's no clear cause and effect. There's multiple ways that you can solve it. And often by just doing one thing, you start to change the nature of the problem itself. So it's very multi-layered, very lots of connections. Stems from a lot around, chaos theory, systems thinking. And so agility is saying, well, actually, you need to be able to take a big complex problem and start to break it down into smaller, more manageable chunks or smaller problems to solve. And you can do that by applying some methods, which is something I'm going to do later today with some people in a workshop. And it's just all about working out how do you be more data-driven, evidence-based in how you make decisions and move forward. And then when you take that into the world of work, it's about how do you be more human-centric. So how do you design solutions to solve people's problems? You need to do that by understanding the experience of work and really kind of getting deep into what's going on for them and empathizing with them. So yeah, the way I see it is it's a way of dealing with the complexity of the world and helping you break complex problem down into smaller problems to solve and targeted solutions. And then it's much easier to show why you do something and the impact that it has. Yeah.
That's amazing. I actually was thinking while you were saying all of that, it's kind of like a weird analogy that came to mind. Kind of like when you're eating and you have to slowly chew and chew and chew. You just can't gulp it all down at once. It has to be it has to be slowly processed through every single part. It's like a team in itself.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So yeah, actually, I was wondering as well. Do you think that if you have a certain type of tendency, studying psychology, I think of the big five, I think of the Myers-Briggs, which isn't exactly just evidence-based, but it's also became popular in recent times. Do you think there's a specific type of person that is more in tune to that kind of structure? Or
yeah, look, I think it's a good question. I think that. Well, it's interesting because I think that different personalities come at it in different ways. So I probably come at it in a more creative, how do I experiment? How do I test? How do I kind of discover the best solution? Where someone that's more analytical will probably come at it in a more systematic way and thinking about, okay, I need to understand the data behind this. I need to understand, I need to minimize risk to make the next decision. So I think actually as a way of working, it can resonate across personality styles, but you probably are coming at it in very different ways and therefore having slightly different, conversations and perspectives. But there is two ways you can look at agility. One is to actually help you minimize risk. So things like experimentation, quickly testing, and even failing helps you understand what's not going to work very quickly, and it helps you understand what not to work on. So minimizing waste, minimizing the big risk that if you kept going and then you released it, it's going to fail very big, you can lose a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of wasted effort. So if you look at it that way, it's actually a way of minimizing risk. Where someone like me, I'm a little bit of a different personality type. My partner can tell you that. And I love the creativity that it brings out. Yeah. So I think again, it can relate to different styles. And I think it's when I work across organizations, it's very important to explain it from different perspectives so everyone understands from their own viewpoint or personality style, how it can help them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was asking this question because the first thing I thought was it can be really intimidating when you're working in a team, when you are that creative and you are that kind of, let's say, more out of the box thinker. Do I suit this job? Are my qualities going to be appreciated, or are they going to be considered childlike or inexperienced? So actually, that's really reassuring. So.
It is. And look, I think it's really. I remember once. A number of years ago doing a session with graduates that were just about to graduate and go out and get their first job. And some of the questions even related to should I shake someone's hand first, or should I wait to be, for them to offer, and some of those really little things. And I suppose, with all of this, it's okay. No one actually has the right answer with these things, and it's more about, exactly. It's more about, I think, by being interested in other people, and this is where that idea of, by understanding the experience that other people are going through, you can better understand the scenario and understand your contribution to it. And I do a lot around design thinking, which is linked to Agile. And that's the whole premise, is to design great solutions, to be creative and to fix people's problems, you have to understand the people viewpoint. You have to step into their shoes. And I think the more that we can build that empathy around how different people, understand the world and experience the world, the better you'll be able to, understand how to introduce yourself as well as design great solutions.
Yeah, I actually was I was giving a look on your socials, and I saw that you mentioned a T type of person, and I wouldn't want to spoil anything of the program, but if you would like to share what exactly that means and how that does that like flow into the workshop.
That's a good question. I actually think that's a really nice thing for people that are listening, particularly anybody that is studying at the moment and looking at their next job. It's a really good framework to use. It does come from the world of agility, but in particular, it's about understanding kind of how you develop your career in a more modern way. And what it's saying is that ultimately you want to be a T. So the T is made up of a vertical, and this is your specialisms. So you might have one or a few, generally not that many, deep specialisms. And this is where you've studied. This is where you've maybe spent the most time in your career so far. This is where you're truly motivated. So you might have psychology, for example. I will have Agile. And so that's your vertical. But if you just do that, you're sort of stuck in that one specialist silo. Also, when you go into the workforce, you need to be able to navigate multiple scenarios. So then you've got to think about what your horizontal is. And your horizontal are all the general capabilities. So you're not the expert, you're not going to, be the deep expert where you've studied for years, but you need to have good general capabilities and a range of things to be successful in your role. And the idea is that the more you're strategic about this T-shape, the more capable you are, the more employable you are, and the more you can actually contribute to multiple different business sort of situations and projects. And some of that, the general capability that I think for anyone going into the workforce should be thinking about now is things like critical thinking, being able to work with data, knowing how to use technology, probably being a bit aware of AI and knowing how it might be impacting the work that they're doing. And then things like being able to, hold a good conversation, ask great questions, those kind of things. So the general capabilities, you can be thinking about what are the things that I need to add to my specialisms that's going to make me an effective communicator or consultant or business person. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those qualities actually can be even like if someone is maybe intimidated to actually start to learn and start to structure those capabilities. Maybe they think that it's a little bit outside of their comfort zone.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe they could, because I was just wondering if it kind of is like really focusing all of your energy into a certain type of adjective or quality. So, for example, when you said critical thinking, I thought, okay, I should be a really curious person.
Yeah, and you can also use terms like I need to be a persuader, or I need to be, as you said, a curious person. I need to be a kind of experimenter, this kind of thing. So you could kind of think of certain, descriptive words to describe that.
So do you think that you need a certain type of mindset to embark on this journey of
Well, it's interesting that you mention that. So the agile is often connected to a concept called the agile mindset, and the agile mindset has sort of three main layers to it. And one is that you believe that we live in a complex world, and therefore we need new ways of working to be able to solve some of the problems that we have. And this is from everything from climate change to, how do you upskill people in a digital AI environment? Skills are changing so quickly. How do you stay on top of that? So that's one belief. The next belief is actually about people. And the argument is that to solve complex problems, you need a multi-skilled team to get to do it. And actually, through the power of people, but through the diversity of people and diversity of thought, you can solve any problem that we have. But you've got to have that belief that the answers come from, collaborating as a team in a diverse way rather than just from, one person or, one central voice. And then the final belief is this idea of proactivity. So this is actually that to find the answers, you need to continuously learn. You need to be curious. You need to want to experiment. You need to want to learn from a failure, understand why, and then take that forward. And that's sort of what propels the Agile concept continuously forward. So I think if you take those three beliefs into a mindset, I think it's a really powerful one to have as you venture into the workplace. Yeah, for sure.
I honestly was thinking, I'm going to say multiple times that, just various connections while you're talking about this program. It's inspiring because I think that a lot of people, especially people in my generation, are just so confused. They have all of this exposure. They are just so open, and there's never been this kind of limitless prospect of the world that it just becomes like, okay, where do I start? How do I start? And I think using mindset as a term is really important because it is very anchoring, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a really good point. And I think for me that, so I take a lot of these concepts around agility into my everyday life just as much as my work life or my business, because you can feel overwhelmed at the moment, particularly I think the digital nature of our lives now. And what you've really seen, particularly since the pandemic and COVID, is this blurring of the personal, the social, and the work or the studying life. And it's very hard to separate them. There's no clear distinction between them. So there's quite a few techniques in Agile, which is all about things such as you have these methods that essentially like a fancy to-do list, but it's all about understanding, well, what is really possible today? What could you actually get done? And then you can have a definition of done. And so if your definition of done is that you really need to go to the gym, as well as this one essay, but all these other things that you think you need to do today, realistically, you're not going to get them done, and actually get much better at what is realistically possible every day. And also, if the world feels really complex, how do you break it down and focus on what's the most important things? Agility talks a lot about value. So how do you prioritize through value? What's the most valuable thing today, whether that be study, work, or personal? And how do I make sure I get those done? And then everything else is a bit of a treat. But generally, you don't get to the other things. So you can take some of those techniques into your everyday. It's quite handy, actually. Yeah.
What would you suggest, maybe since most of our viewers are students, what do you think is something that they can implement in their everyday lives, like starting now, something simplistic?
Yeah, well, I actually think, so what I started to describe there is called personal Kanban. And you could Google that. I can send some links to you. Personal Kanban. So Kanban is a way of visualizing work that we use a lot in Agile. It actually comes from Japan. It's a term that's Japanese. And Kanban literally means a ticketing system. So you move sort of tickets across a visual board. And the tickets represent things to get done. But it has these columns, and you have to do, doing, and done, and then you have this backlog and dumping area. And what you can do is you can put everything up on your Kanban that you need to get done at any time. So I have one where I just have everything up there. So it can be, got to go to the dentist just as much as I need to, design this workshop for learning more. And So everything in the doing column, you should limit the amount of things you're doing at any one time. And then you have to get something done before you can move something new into the doing column. And then you have this definition of done. How do I make sure I've achieved what's most valuable today? And then think about how I prioritize tomorrow. So it's a really great technique to actually be quite productive and effective. And it's okay when you visualize work, you'll see that there's all this work that you don't get done on a daily basis. Indeed, sometimes you never get to it, but just by writing it and adding it to the Kanban, you feel better because it's out of your mind and it's on the Kanban. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely less scary.
Exactly, yeah. So I use it myself. A lot of people that work in Agile use it as a way to just run their lives as well as, run their business. So that would be my top tip. Yeah.
I actually think that I should really take that into consideration.
Really,
because
look it up. It's really,
really-
really good. Yeah, I'll send some links and you can add it
Thank
to
you.
the
Okay.
socials. Yeah.
Yeah, mostly because in exam season,
It's perfect for exams. So you could break down what you've got to study, what you've got to do, because the idea is every day you might need to reprioritize your time.
Exactly.
And so Agile is all about how do you have methods where you can adapt the plan, because in a complex world, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So you can plan so far ahead, but you need to be able to have moments where you reprioritize. So if you break it all down into these smaller tasks on your Kanban board, you can visualize everything. And then each day you go, all right, based on what's happening today, what can I actually achieve? And then off you go. Yeah.
Do you think it's important to also, while you're in a workspace or in any other context, prioritize also yourself, your kind of
Yeah,
time
totally,
to
yeah,
nurture and everything? Do you
definitely.
think that can be applied, like in the sense of, is there a way to understand the balance?
Yeah, look, I think the balance varies at any one time, and that's why I say if you do the personal Kanban, you have your, what you need to do for study or for work up there, as well as your personal kind of commitments. And then you're really thinking about, okay, today, if I need to get this essay done, but I also want to go to the gym, what does that look like? Is there something else that I have to forego? Because then you can start to think about, how much time are you spending on yourself versus your work? Because I think we can lose sense of both. I know I do all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, but I think, I've once heard resilience described as, it's not an overriding thing that you have resilience. It's actually that at different moments we feel more resilient because we've taken some time, we've had a good sleep, we're feeling healthy at the moment, we've been eating well, we haven't had too many bad things happen to us. And then other times you can feel like you've had a lot of bad things happen to you, you've been really busy, you're quite stressed. And it's recognizing where you're at any one time and when you might need to call it and say, actually, I'm not that resilient at the moment. I need to, take some time to get my resilience back. Yeah. So.
Yeah, what you said actually reminded me of a famous quote. I don't know who it's from, but I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know it. The fastest way to success is failure.
Yeah, I'm not sure who said it, but yeah, exactly. And agility is all about failing fast, but I call it failing cheaply and cheerfully. So it's about minimizing failure. So by testing things at a very small scale, getting some data, understanding why something might not work, and using that to then understand the right direction to go. It means you're propelled forward. There's a proactivity to it. You need to try things to understand what is the right direction to go. Yeah.
And to explain to our viewers, what is exactly the difference between human resources, learning and development, and people teams?
Good question. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes they're all the same thing.
All right.
So, okay, the best way to describe it is that human resources is often the profession in which you may have someone that looks after people strategy of the business. They may look after recruitment. They may look after payroll. They may look after, health and well-being. So it's sort of all the kind of hygiene factors, I suppose, of working somewhere. Also, what kind of contract you have, how much you get paid, how you get rewarded. Then there's other elements such as learning and development. And learning and development is generally how do you develop skills in a workplace? How do you make sure people have the right capabilities, but also technical understanding to be good in their jobs and to sort of make the organisation a success. Now that can sit in HR, it can sit separately, you can buy it in, so it can be its own industry, I suppose, but often it sits within human resources. And then what was it? The people team.
Yeah.
So everyone hates the term human resources because it makes it sound like we are, owned and we're not really human. We're just resources that you move around and your numbers.
Okay.
So lots of people try not to use that term anymore, and they try and use people instead. So that's why you've probably heard things like people teams or people and culture. So that's sort of more the modern term.
Okay,
Yeah.
I had no idea myself.
There you go.
I thought they were just three entities.
No. So generally, I do all three, put it that way.
Okay.
So, and they're all interchangeable.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when I was looking at PXO, which I will ask you to explain more about in a second, I saw that you guys were, well, you all in your description, your page description, said that you would be via Agile ready to intervene in all three of these sectors. So
yeah, definitely. Because, well, what we do is we specialize in people, so the people side of business. And that's often called the employee experience, and there's lots that sit in that, and it's often the journey that someone takes. So when you join an organization, there's how do they find you? How do you get interviewed? How do you get the job? What makes you join that organization?
all key things.
All key things,
So
exactly.
very important.
And then when you start, we look at what's often known as the onboarding. So how do you get going? How do you know you've got the right skills? How do you connect with your team and your manager? And then you develop, don't you, your career as you're at that organization. You might go into new roles or new teams, or you might learn new skills that you apply to different projects. Then you might get promoted, or you might go somewhere else. And so that's part of the journey as well. And then even we look at what is it like when you leave the organization. So if you're fabulous, we want to stay in touch. We might want to keep connected. We might want you to come back one day. So the employee experience is thinking about that whole journey that people have in an organization. And in that will be learning, in that is strategy, but also things like, what are you getting paid? How do you feel when you come in? Do you have all the equipment to get the job done? So all of that can sit in the world of human resources. Yeah.
So Agile can be applied not only to the company or the business aspect, but also to the individual.
Definitely, yeah. And so what I do is I look at lots of the techniques that business teams are using to design commercial products, from your phone to everything that we use. And I take those techniques and I look at how do we design great products and services for humans in the workplace to make their career life better. Yeah.
Well, having for sure had so many encounters with so many different situations, what do you think is, like, in your opinion, the most common mistake that an employee can make throughout their journey in a company, in a business?
I think it's probably going back to what I talked about earlier, is being open, or going back to what you talked about, being curious, but willing to listen, but willing to understand different perspectives. Because I think in the workplace, that's what it all becomes. It's navigating how to work with others, how to kind of collaborate effectively, how to use their brain power to, get to great ideas and great results. And sometimes you can feel quite stressed by that. You need to deliver to deadlines. You need to, meet certain market business scenarios. But if you're willing to work with others, understand perspectives and collaborate, I think you can be really successful. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was thinking, yeah, no, absolutely. I think that in that case, I believe that anyone who has those qualities, that willingness to be open, like wanting to be more open-minded, wanting to experiment, wanting to really just think about their perspective and kind of turn it upon itself. Like, since I personally started university, psychology has been just this new world of, but actually you could be wrong. And
totally. And you're not, and often you are. I think that's what you start to realize as you work with other people. You're not always right. And that's okay. So this is what I thought it was. Now I've got more data. This is what I know it is. And now let's look at how we solve the problem together. So I think it's being willing to not always be right. And that's critical thinking, isn't it? It's being willing to understand a different point of view because you now have new data. So, yeah.
And now that Agile has made its also Italian debut and everything, do you think there's a really big difference between the way maybe a more westernized business approach is maintained in comparison to a more Eastern one, or in your vast international experience, do you think that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I've worked in in Italy, in Japan, in Australia, lots of different European countries, South America, and what I've found is that it's often less about the cultural norms of the country and more about the organization you're in. So sometimes organizations can be very traditional, very hierarchical, quite top down in their decision making. And less open to this idea of experimentation, collaboration, being wrong, and finding out the answers together. So actually, it's how do you build a team around that? And I think if you have if you can bring that mindset into the organization, generally all cultures that are working there really enjoy it and can make it a success. Yeah.
I think that's probably why it is such a success.
Yeah.
Like the fact that it's this kind of entity that is able to mimic its best parts everywhere in the world.
Yeah. And exactly. So I think it can cross boundaries when it comes to culture, which is really effective. Yeah, definitely.
And what do you think right now is the potential of Agile? Where do you think the next step is?
So what you're seeing in a business environment is actually, it's moving beyond using Agile just to design great digital products. So, Agile pretty much sits behind everything from your phone to Netflix to all the equipment we're using here today. It also sits behind things like AI, because how do you constantly find the problem to solve and kind of, personalize the experience. So I think what's happening is that we've used it a lot to create these products, but now we need to lift up and think, how do we use it to solve big, complex problems that we're facing in society in general? And now I think I'm seeing in organizations this awareness that, if you design a product, it's got to be able to either be good for the environment or good for society, just as much as maybe make a lot of money, and look and feel good. So it's how do we bring some of the bigger picture, I think, into some of the designs that we have in organizations to make it more, to make it connect to some of the bigger questions that we have in society. Yeah.
And going back to you, what exactly inspired, if there was anything that kind of sparked this first interest in kind of creating a path to a better society under this point of view?
I think it's just, when I talked about, I discovered people, that I was better with people over numbers. And I became quite passionate about how do you create workplaces that people want to be in, that they can have give their best lives, give their best working lives, and also feel really motivated. And I worked in a few places where that wasn't happening, and I think that was the spark. Yeah, exactly. So I went, you know what, I think I can find another way of doing this. And so that's sort of been my mission ever since then, is to help other organizations find those answers. How do we make this a successful business, but also a great place to work for people? Yeah.
That's really inspiring. And so now this workshop that you're going to be starting today, what exactly are we starting from, and what can we get out of it?
So we're going to do a design sprint. So we're going to actually move through the design thinking sequence. We're going to start with a complex business problem. Okay. And by the end of it, people are going to design a little experiment to run. So, yeah.
All right.
All in 3 hours. Not a problem.
Ignite critical thinking at its finest. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see how we go.
Great. And just asking, based on your experience, what exactly do you think what has this experience taught you personally? If there is anything that comes to mind.
Oh, that you're not always right, that often you're not. That every day, you've got to, there's little experiments every day that you've got to learn from. And but also being curious to find the data. So what is the data telling you? What are the facts about the situation, and how to use that to make decisions? Because I think in the workplace we can get very emotive. We can, everyone has an opinion, lots of assumptions.
Especially in these Latin countries.
Particularly, yeah. And it's about kind of just putting that to the side for a moment and exploring, well, what's really going on here? And because if you use that approach, what you create will last a lot longer, and very quickly you can get everyone to buy into it. Because I think that's the key here, is a lot of this is how do you co-create the change, or how do you co-create the solution with other people? Because then you're not always trying to drag them through the change. It's they're all going to be in there doing it with you, and that's what you want.
You're really creating leaders under this point of view.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
creating that mindfulness, that level-headedness.
Exactly. So, what's the data telling us? Now let's make some wise decisions together.
And then we'll pave the path.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. And
Pleasure.
Is there anything else you would like to leave us with before?
Oh, other than it's fabulous to be in Modena and eating great food. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Everyone, this has been an amazing experience. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys were able to follow. For sure, we have some amazing native speakers out there listening to us today. And if you're not, then I hope it was a very instructive experience. Also, to better your English. So thank you again. This is Natal Dank, and her new book is out. So please go and get a look at it. And her
Yes.
workshop is today. So stay tuned. Thank you.